Hello everybody, this is Vincent Grosso and welcome to another episode on my channel. Today's topic is going to be Charles Bonnet syndrome. So, I have Charles Bonnet syndrome, but you might have it too and not even know it. So, I heard this Charles Bonnet come up 4 times in 1 week this week, so I had to make a video on it. In a whole year, I never heard about it one time. So all the time I thought I was going crazy, I found out about it, and it took an awful long time to realize it. But maybe me making this video will help you if you're seeing weird things. So Charles Bonnet syndrome is when you see apparitions, objects, weird things that just shouldn't be there, and you know they're not real, and they show up for like a minimum amount of time, no longer than a minute long, or usually most of the time they're like less than a second long, but you see them, you notice them, and it kind of freaks you out. So I didn't even know what Charles Bonnet syndrome was, never heard of it. Of course, I never even knew a visually impaired person in my life, and now here I am, visually impaired in both eyes, and I'm waking up one morning, and guess what? I open my eyes, I'm looking around my room, and I'm still seeing my dream panning out in my central vision. So my vision is a big, foggy sheet of pixels and pigments and gray. So it was almost like it was a movie canvas for my dream. So when I opened my eyes, my brain was still telling me that my eyes were shut, even though I had light perception. So I just thought it was the weirdest thing. It lasted less than a second, but it was enough that I noticed it and freaked me out. So that was just one instant. I'm going to note, I didn't want to tell anybody about these things that were happening. I didn't tell any doctors because the last thing I wanted to do was say something, and then they were like, oh, well, we need to do this test and that test. And I was just so fed up with tests and everything at this time, so I didn't say anything. I kept it to myself. Well, another thing happened. I was sitting at the kitchen table with my beautiful wife, and she leaned forward to say something to me, and I realized that her whole face turned into a cartoon. No joke. She was all different blobs of colors, and it was very cartoonish. Almost like the movie Cool World. Has anybody ever seen that with Brad Pitt? It came out in the 80s, so if you had vision in one time, you probably know the movie I'm talking about. And then there's a scene in the movie where the people have... They were cartoons that turn human, and they go sporadic human to cartoon, so they go blah, blah, blah. And that's what this was like, and it totally freaks me out. And I was seeing it in real life, something you would only see in a movie. So, that was another thing that happened to me. Now, I would see, watching television, I didn't know what audio description was, so I would try as hard as I could to watch TV when I became visually impaired. And I would notice, because when I look at the TV, all I see is a big shade of gray fog and some silhouettes or some movement behind it. And as I'm watching this, I would see an eyeball, an eye, not an eyeball, but like an eye with lids and lashes and everything, about the size of a football right in front of my face. That, or I would see a full face of a person that I've never met in my life, but it would just happen to be there, and it would last like a second and disappear. So these were like really troubling things for me. And then what else? It gets even better. So one day, my wife and my daughter were downstairs in our basement. This is half, and this is my half right here. And the other half is a sewing room and laundry room. So I come down, and I'm going down the stairs, and I see my peripheral vision, my wife, doing laundry. I see her holding a basket, walking across the room. So I say, you doing laundry? And she says, no, I'm sewing a quilt. And I walk into the laundry room, and I notice nobody's in the laundry room. And my wife is at her sewing machine, sitting down, making a quilt. And that really freaked me out. And then what else happened after that? I was at a Savers. It's a store that's just like Goodwill or Salvation Army. And this was probably the really creepiest thing because we were out in public and this happened. I was looking at toys section, and because I like retro video games, I collect old games, and they're always hiding in these sections. I collect Guitar Hero guitars, stuff like that, and old board games and old toys like He-Man toys and stuff. Anything that could be worth money, I'm looking for it on a Sunday. So it's like a hobby for me. And my wife, my son, and my daughter were about 10 feet next to me, and I'm looking and I'm fiddling with things, and time's going by, I'm not even realizing what's going on. I realize I want to move down the way. But before I walk anywhere in a store, especially a store like this where kids are playing, they always put toys on the ground and walk away and don't put them back. I looked at my feet. I have no lower peripheral vision, so I looked down to see if anything was down there. And I noticed a little girl with blonde, almost white as snow hair. And I thought it was my daughter at first, but then I had to think twice because my daughter's a brunette. So I looked up and I looked to the side of me and I saw two ladies about 2 feet next to us, and they were looking at a rack of clothes, and I asked them, "Is this your daughter?" They had the same color hair, by the way, as the little girl next to me, these two ladies. So I'm assuming it's their kid. And she says, "No." And I said, "Is that my daughter?" Because I knew for some odd reason that was my daughter. And I looked down and I said, "Mia." And she looked up and said, "Yes, Daddy." And her hair was instantly brunette again. Freaked me out. So everything around me was, I could have looked at everybody in that store and they probably at that moment would have had white blondish hair. So, but I only noticed my daughter and those two ladies. So that was a real freaky episode for me. Now, all these things are happening to me, and I'm not really noticing them. Another thing is, at nighttime, I'm night blind. A lot of people are visually impaired, can relate. I'm sure you get night blind as well. I can't see in the dark very well, and when I do see in the dark, all I see is kaleidoscope. So I see like gray, white, whooshy, looks almost like things are dancing around. It's really, really weird, not fun to look at. So I gotten used to that over the year that I've been visually impaired, and but I realized I was seeing like little gray apparitions, like shadow people and stuff. One night I woke up thinking I was looking at a shadow figure at the foot of my bed, but it wasn't. I instead of getting scared and be like, "Oh," shake my head, I kept looking at it, and come to realize it was just the kaleidoscope in my vision just moved the right way that made it look like a shape. So I knew that wasn't anything. But Charles Bonet messes with you. One morning, my mobility specialist came over, and this is how I learned about it. He came over and was telling me about all the different people that he trains that have different types of vision. Because I was telling him I wasn't sure if I was ready for the cane yet, as I still have my peripheral vision. He said, "No, you should learn it no matter what vision you have. Because your vision could be worse 2 days from now." But I'll get into that in a future video. But at the same time, he started talking about the weird things that people will see. And he said he had a client that saw little blue people. And when I heard that, I got intrigued, and I grew the courage and told him the things I was seeing. And he said, "Yeah, that sounds like Charles Bonnet syndrome." So when he said Charles Bonnet syndrome, I never knew what it was. I asked him, and he told me. I Googled it, and I learned by myself, without a doctor telling me, that this was probably Charles Bonnet. And go figure, as soon as I learned that what Charles Bonnet was, 90% of all the things that I was seeing all the time stopped. It's like my brain just like clicked and said, "Oh, I know what's going on." And it wasn't until like a year later, through my visual impairment, that I went to Mass Eye and Ear, and a doctor finally asked me if I knew what Charles Bonnet was. So all the other doctors didn't even mention it to me or anything. And I mean, it's probably my fault because I wasn't mentioning I was seeing anything because I was afraid of the results of telling them. But I fessed up to the doctors, and they agreed it's Charles Bonnet syndrome. So if you are seeing weird things, it's probably just because you have Charles Bonnet syndrome. But I am not a doctor. Do not take my advice until a professional tells you the same. So, do you have a Charles Bonnet syndrome story? If not, have you been seeing weird things? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear them. And click the subscribe button. Click the notification bell if you haven't clicked that, so you can get future videos. And hit the like button. This was a pleasure. I hope you guys liked my little stories and my little rants. And let me know. See you later, guys. And I'm not seeing the button today, I guess.